Hi, friends. Welcome back to Connecting the Dots. Today, I have one of my friends on the show, Rachel, who I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with for almost 2 years now, which is crazy. Would love for you to introduce yourself and give a little background of who you are to the listeners.
Thanks for having me. So I'm Rachel Burkholz. I am a functional nutritionist and I am a CNS candidate. Fingers crossed, maybe by the time this comes out, official CNS, and also a 200-hour registered yoga teacher.
Yay. Always love hearing people's story. Over the last few years, I've heard bits and pieces of yours, and I'm excited for you to share more about it on the show. Before we get into more specifics, just would love to know like a little bit more of your background and how you got to the CNS track.
Yeah. So I have a bachelor's degree from the College of Charleston in exercise science. During that last semester of my senior year is when I decided to pursue my 200-hour yoga teacher training, kind of expand my practice and teach. In retrospect, that kind of determined how the rest of my future went a little bit, which I'm sure I'll talk about. I graduated College of Charleston, took some time off and worked while I was studying for the GRE. So that's the graduate record examination. And then I was planning to apply to OT school, which is occupational therapy. That was planned from the moment I was a senior in high school. That was kind of always the path that I was planning on taking. Took the test, was applying to graduate programs, and then never ended up sending in any of the applications. I'm sure I'll share too more about why, but I ended up pursuing a master's in human nutrition and functional medicine from the University of Western States. So I don't know if it's considered an accelerated program, but it was like 2.5 years. It's a quarter program. So I went nonstop with like 2-week breaks between each quarter, worked at a sports medicine clinic during that time, and then graduated and found a CNS internship, which then pursued the 1,000 hours that we have to have, took our boards. And then in December or in October of last year, I made the decision to dive fully into Rooted by Rachel. So now I'm working with clients virtually full time while finishing up my very few hours that I have left. So that's kind of like professional background of me.
Yes, I'm manifesting for you. By the time this is done, hours done, CNS check.
Yes. Ready.
You're so
If
ready.
you know, you know.
Yeah, you're so ready. I'm sure at some point in this episode, we'll chat more about our experience with CNSing and how we got there. But I would love to know more about how you got there. So, what influenced you to pursue nutrition? Why didn't you become an OT? Give me the story.
Okay, we're going to make this hopefully a more condensed version of the very long story that it could be. So, when I graduated College of Charleston and was working and studying for that GRE, I was not feeling good at all. Like, I felt terrible. I had been for some time, but honestly thought it was just because I was stressed. And when you graduate college, it's just a stressful time to be like, okay, I'm an adult. What am I doing now? Or I'm going to grad school and I'm doing all of these things. And just really the unknown is a little terrifying, right? So I felt super inflamed, so much brain fog. Some days I could barely put a sentence together, and hormonal acne, was dealing with some pelvic pain, some hirsutism, which if you don't know what that is, it's a little bit of like extra hair growth. So like not fun things to deal with that I had no idea what was happening to my body. Extremely bloated, super painful to eat things. And full disclosure, during that time too, I struggled with like major body image and body dysmorphia and disordered eating, which honestly probably started from the age of 10. So that was already adding to a very toxic situation. Fully vegan at the time was definitely not nourishing my body properly, which I'll talk about. But I was crashing while I was studying for that. And I remember I had an OB appointment. I was 22 years old at the time. And I had been on Google. So like to me, I was super informed because Google knows everything. Right? So I went in, had so many questions. I explained how I was feeling. I was still on birth control at this point in time. Granted, take that into account. She did some testing on me, wasn't super thorough. Basically came back and told me, that if I wanted to get pregnant and hold a pregnancy at that time, it would be virtually impossible, which as a 22-year-old woman is like not really what you want to hear. Yeah, I was on the pill, but she made it seem like more than that, right? It was, long story short, because of my AMH levels. And if you're not familiar with that, it's that anti-Mullerian hormone levels. I was on the pill. It's going to skew everything, but it was super low for my age. So not what you really want to hear, and honestly started to spiral a little bit. So I did a lot of research and then started looking into like the food aspect. I was like, well, how can I change that number? Became very hyper focused on that. Decided to add eggs, fish back in, change some things around. She retested the hormone X amount of months later. They were better, right? But I was still bloated, still had acne, had just read the book Woman Code, which I'm sure most women have.
Sure.
And I honestly think that Beyond the Pill may have come out at this point, but I can't remember the timeline. So I decided that I wanted to come off birth control at some point in the near future. I told her about this, was mocked for it. Okay.
What?
I know. It was like, she's like, you read a book and now you want to come off birth control? Okay.
Okay. All right.
Lots of thoughts. So yes. Then I was having pretty extreme pelvic pain, and not like, if you have experienced pelvic pain, like, like deep infiltrating pelvic pain, that it's kind of hard to explain a little bit. It's like almost like very deep cramps, right? But just a little bit more pressure. I hadn't experienced that before. I told her about this, and her response to me, it kills me every time, is your vagina is probably just dry. Use coconut oil. Which, if you've ever had pelvic pain, it's not that kind of feeling. So safe to say that was the last time I ever saw her.
Cool.
Yeah, I was done there. I fit very much criteria of PCOS. So PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. Looks very different for every single woman. It's a hormonal disorder that's common in women of reproductive age. And so it can be characterized with a lot of things, but there's a criteria that you have to fit in order to be diagnosed, which is not having periods or very irregular, the hyperandrogenism, so like the acne, hirsutism, elevated male hormones, and then polycystic ovaries on ultrasound. So she did not test for like any of these things. I had some of these symptoms, not all of them. Again, on the pill. So was being suppressed. Was told I was fine. Went to my primary care doctor and was told the exact same thing. But if your hair is falling out and you feel like garbage, you're really not fine. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. And there was just not enough information at the time about PCOS and SIBO and gut microbiome, really anything. And functional medicine was fascinating to me because it actually focused on the root cause. So that's when I applied to the University of Western States, pursued my master's, which was great. And I did learn a lot. Still was not feeling good at that time, to be totally honest. When one symptom would go away, another one would pop up. It just felt like this never-ending cycle. And at this time, I was also seeing holistic doctors. I was traveling to see functional doctors, started seeing an integrative doctor, did the parasite cleanse it. I did everything, you name it. I probably tried it. So the whole thing. Had SIBO, did all the treatments, hypothyroidism, got on medicine, right? Like did antimicrobials, elemental diet, had a colonoscopy in my 20s. So, it was just a whole thing. And then honestly, it wasn't until I turned 28, so I'm 30 now, that I was diagnosed with PCOS. I went to an OB in my area, the only one that dealt with PCOS, the only one I could find. Took forever to get in with her. Had a vaginal ultrasound, which I don't think I had really been given. I was when I was on the pill, but not to this extent. Told the nurse everything that was going on with me. Yes, I was having regular cycles. I was off birth control at this point. My transition off went really well. Only thing that really happened to me was I started gaining weight like crazy, which was abnormal for me and just really didn't feel good in my body. And after spending so many years feeling like a stranger in my body, it just wasn't great. And I just finished this master's and I was like, I'm supposed to be working with clients. And how can I work with clients when I feel like this? Which is a whole other thing because we both know that's not true. And the doctor walked in. She had seen my ultrasound. She had seen what the nurse wrote. And with a smile on her face, which I don't know why she was smiling, she's like, girl, you have PCOS and you honestly probably have endometriosis. And I get emotional sometimes when I think about this, because if you've ever experienced this, it takes like 6 to 10 years, maybe like even 8 to 12 years to even get a diagnosis of PCOS, especially also endometriosis. And it was so validating. Like I knew that I had this, but just the validation of someone else telling me, and all the years of frustration of feeling like, what's wrong with me? And my friends and family probably thinking I was a little crazy, that like, this is what's going on. So she was wonderful, but again, recommended birth control and then told me to stop eating carbs, which we can talk about more. But you and I both know that's the last thing that you should be doing. So I put myself on my own regimen, finishing school. So there was stress. So things would work, they wouldn't work. Kind of figured out what worked for me. Ended up having laparoscopic endometriosis excision surgery, which I'm so glad that I did do. But again, like didn't feel like myself for a long time because it messes with your hormones. So like nutrition side of things really came into play at that point. Like I'd always eaten healthy, but I wasn't nourishing my body enough, which I see with so many women. And when I started actually nourishing my body more and eating more instead of less and working out, doing things that worked for me, like my body changed. Like, yes, I lost weight and that didn't inherently like make me feel better. Sure, it was nice, right? But it was like everything that came after that, like the spark and like the joy that brought back to my like actually feeling good. And ultimately ended up reversing my thyroid, hypothyroidism, which who knows if I really needed to be on medication. Endocrinologist I saw, who was wonderful. So always find really good people, I always say, really encouraged me to go off. And I'm so glad I did, even though I was fearful, because now I know like a year later, like it really was because I wasn't nourishing my body properly at all. And it was because of everything that I was seeing on the internet and everything that I was reading. And you and I know like there's so much information out there. So becoming a nutritionist and going the functional medicine route, like I learned so much I use. I also learned things that I don't use. But that's why working with a provider and ones that you really like and that support you and no matter what you're going to do is so important, which is why I got into this, right? I felt like there was a lacking need for this in the women's health field, which is why it's more of my niche, because I wish that I had the support that I'm able to give clients now, and I didn't. Like I searched for it, spent so much money, time, and effort and years of my life, and then ended up doing it. I did have help, but ended up doing a lot of it through my own research, which I see happening all the time.
Yeah.
So lots the short version of why I got into this, which I know felt very long and chaotic, but yeah.
Oh, it's not long and chaotic. It's your journey, it's your story. And I can't believe that you started with this at 22 and you didn't get a diagnosis till you were 28. But that's kind of what you said is normal for people dealing with hormonal stuff.
Yeah. And that's sad. It really does need change. And I think there's more awareness around it now, but there's still so much lacking. Like it's women's health. We need to do better.
Yeah. Well, my like first inkling of there just not being enough information on women's health was actually after reading Woman Code and literally being like, huh, why do we have a 9 to 5 job? Oh, because the men's circadian rhythm is 24 hours. Why are we using studies that are 80-90% done on men and then saying the same for women?
Right? It's like, we're not the same. We don't have the same things going on. Exactly. Yeah. Very different.
So yeah, I'm so grateful that you started to pursue this niche and totally forgot to ask you the opening question, but I think it's fine because I'd love to know from all of the research that you've done and schooling that you've had. And I love how you said you found the foods and the physical activity that worked for you. What is one thing that you do every day, a daily ritual or habit that you've acquired throughout your journey?
Okay. It's really hard for me to pick one. So
Oh,
I'm going to
pick
say,
one.
okay,
Tell us
it's going to
all.
be, it's really hard.
Okay.
I'm going to say my general morning routine. So like I'm very specific on how I start my day because I'm a firm believer that it sets the tone for the entire day. Like if I don't do it, I feel a little out of sorts,
Yeah.
right? So wake up, first things first is hydration for me. I drink warm water with lemon. I've done this for years. It's just a part of like I romanticize my morning routine sometimes. I think that's kind of nice. Drink it, helps digestion, and then I get sun in my eyes. If it's raining, we improvise, but sun in the eyes. And then I write a gratitude list for the day. And I don't like when I skip this because then I feel like when I'm in a funk a little bit, I go back to it, right? So like something I always prioritize now every day. And then I like to avoid screen time for at least 30 minutes to an hour when I wake up, which is not always realistic as a business owner, as you know. So I try to do that and wake up earlier and just like put it to the side. And then my movement, like my non-negotiable is movement, but movement that works for me. So that's either yoga, getting in a walk, weights. I no longer do high intensity interval training. I used to do 2 workouts a day, both high intensity, which destroyed my hormones. So that is not what I do. I do things that feel good for me. I love movement. It's my favorite part of the day. And then I eat a very nourishing breakfast. So before people come at me to say that I don't eat before I work out in the morning, I promise that I do eat a snack, right? So I eat a snack before, and then I eat my full breakfast of getting in at least 30 grams of protein directly after that. Because that nourishment, again, how you start your day is how it's going to go. So blood sugar, I always start my clients off that way. The way you start is the way that your blood sugar is going to go for the rest of it. Like it's just true. That foundation, whenever, whatever time that's at, that first meal of the day.
Love that. What are some of your go-to breakfasts?
So I love protein chia pudding. That's my fave, but I don't usually just eat it by itself. I'll do it with some eggs. I love turkey bacon. It's the best. Sometimes I love a bowl of any sort. So like a scrambled egg bowl with like an Applegate turkey burger cut up in it, an avocado, chef's kiss. So every meal that I have, I like to have protein, fat, fiber, and then some carbohydrates because I know that you still need carbohydrates even if you have PCOS.
Yeah, even if you have any type of metabolic situation, still need carbs because that's also fruits and vegetables.
Exactly. It's like, why are we telling people this? It's very outdated. Okay. There's difference in different carbs, right? Like there is a difference in starting your day off with a cookie versus starting your day off with a sweet potato. There's nothing wrong with the cookie, but they're just going to be a little different.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. So eat the protein, then eat the cookie. It's all about nutrition by addition.
Love. Thank you for giving some tips and sharing your morning routine, how you developed that. And I would love to hear like a little bit more of some tweaks that you made once you were diagnosed with PCOS, some things that you started doing. Love that you switched to more gentle movement, making sure you're getting enough protein. Anything else?
Yeah. So the movement, the protein, and then I got on a supplement routine that worked for me. So it's going to look different for everybody. My favorite supplement of all time that really helped me was inositol, which if people don't know what that is, it's very similar to a lot of them with PCOS get put on metformin. So it's a more natural form of that without the digestive distress because metformin can be really great, but it also causes a lot of stomach issues. And not everyone wants to be running to the bathroom every 5 minutes. So like doing things like that, also like incorporating certain aspects of my diet, like spearmint tea for like the androgens and the skin, and just like really, really focusing on like little things like hydration. Also, what I was consuming mentally was a huge part of that for me. I stopped following a lot of social media accounts that I felt like I had to look like them or do things their way because it just wasn't serving me. It was like setting a boundary for myself, letting go of like toxicity. And that happened in my relationships and friendships too. Like I didn't have the energy and time to spread there anymore. So that is a huge part of it also, like the mental health component to it. And then I really just focused on the foundation. I stopped being complicated.
That's cool.
Does right? But doesn't happen for everybody. And everyone with PCOS, it looks very different. But I definitely had insulin resistance. And so I did focus on like what I was doing, how I was pairing my foods, but not in an obsessive way. It became like very intuitive for me. So like I still enjoy, foods. Again, like I love a plate of fries and I love cookies. Like I will not stop eating those. So I just focus on like how I'm consuming them, right? Like, am I consuming them by themselves or am I adding protein to this?
Yeah,
So just like looking at little things like that, knowing that I can eat them, it's just how I'm doing it.
totally. And I love how you said that. And it's not like being restrictive in a way of cutting things out. It's just changing the way that you pair things or order foods to make sure that it's not going to spike your blood sugar.
I know. I played around with a continuous glucose monitor for a little bit and it was fun because I was able to see what foods for me by themselves would spike versus ones that wouldn't. And it was really good information. And I know not everybody has access to that, but if you do, it's really cool because you can actually see like what's going on with your body. You can do it manually, but that gives you more information too, which is always extremely helpful when figuring out how to eat, especially if you have PCOS or any sort of metabolic issue going on.
For sure. Because something might spike your blood sugar, but not spike somebody else's. So it can be obviously there's foods that we could say, yeah, like it's more likely to, but we don't necessarily know how it feels in your body. So really solid tip. And I also love how you said about like looking at what you are consuming because we know that stress spikes blood sugar, stress impacts everything.
Right? I know. And I also think it's important, like, even though I like went on my own kind of protocol, it is important for practitioners to have practitioners, right? Like they can look at me in a non-biased way, but it is, you have to realize that there's just, I think there was a study and I feel like it came out or like an article about only like 2%, I could be getting this wrong, of information for health on TikTok is accurate, which I thought was already known. But like apparently like, and people are like, oh yeah, like it isn't accurate to just listen to your favorite influencer. Like sure, they're sharing their experience. It doesn't mean it's a fact. And it doesn't mean it's a fact for you either. It could actually be harmful for you.
Totally.
So it's when working with nutritionists like us or other providers comes in handy when you're kind of overwhelmed with all of it.
I feel like a lot of my clients, which I'm so grateful that they do this, and I'm sure you experience this too, is they'll see something on Instagram, on TikTok, and then they'll bring it to session and they'll be like, I saw XYZ person is doing this. Do you think that this would be helpful for me? And sometimes I'm like, yeah, like that would be really great. Like the sleepy time mocktail situation was really great for a client. She had seen it. She was like, should I try it? And I was like, yes. And some things would be really terrible. Like, oh, I forget. Like, I had a client who wanted to try a supplement, but it had folic acid and she's MTHFR. And so I was like, that would be really bad. And so it's okay to be curious and to be looking to people for advice, but then checking it with the people that you're working with.
Yeah, exactly. I got asked recently about the oat Zempic. So not Ozempic, but oat, OAT Zempic drink. I feel like that's been a very big trend on TikTok lately. It's a lot of fiber
It's a lot.
in one sitting.
Yeah, I remember when you sent that to me. So for context, we always look at the trends that are going around and send them to each other. And we're like, what if we started a trend that was actually good for you?
Yeah, we're going to come up with one. Just wait and see. We're still in development.
Stay tuned for our trend.
Something that's going to help you.
Yeah. And then also wanted to go back to your endo journey. So how did you end up getting diagnosed with that? And for people who don't know, like what is the difference between endo and PCOS?
Yeah. So PCOS is so the criteria I listed, like the high androgens, irregular menstrual cycle, male pattern baldness, all those symptoms, insulin resistance, irregular cycles, they kind of overlap, to be totally honest, which I think is very confusing. And then endometriosis is when there is lining growing. I'm going to make this simple, but it's like when lining is growing where it shouldn't, essentially. So like outside the uterus. And it can grow, like, and I feel like people are realizing this now. I mean, it can grow in people's like rib cage, like chest. Honestly, until I had my own endo journey, I didn't know any of this. I thought it was literally just reproductive, like that's it. But it can affect your entire body. I did not have an inkling really that I had endo. Okay, a little bit, but essentially the only way to really get a formal diagnosis is through surgery. So it's a laparoscopic surgery. Went in, found that I had like stage 1 in some areas and stage 2, so it wasn't super progressed, but it explained my recurrent SIBO because it was on my bowel, but it wasn't infiltrating it. So she was able to remove that. Now, if it was infiltrating, they usually have to bring in a different doctor. But honestly, my digestion was so good after that, which was great, and didn't have SIBO again. But yeah, that's how I got diagnosed. It was honestly a whirlwind and kind of crazy because it wasn't anything that I had really looked into. And until I dealt with the endometriosis diagnosis and the whole thing, I didn't know as much about it. And that's also like a whole league of its own.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was that process like?
It was very interesting because when she came in and said I had PCOS, and she's like, I think you have it. Like, I'm pretty sure that you have endometriosis. I was very confused because everything that I knew was like, you can't see that on ultrasound. To her, there was some suspicious, I don't remember her wording, that made her suspicious that it was there.
Okay.
And I do think, and I could be butchering this, so please don't come at me, people, but like there are some like chocolate cysts that can be seen sometimes on ultrasounds. She's an expert in this. Like she does this. I would trust her through and through to open me up anytime.
Yeah.
But she had seen enough of this that through my symptoms and everything, she felt like it. She didn't think at the time that I needed to do the surgery. She thought that birth control was fine, yada, yada. I personally just didn't want to go back on it. It was a personal decision for me. If that's a decision for you and you like that, awesome. I'm pro what works for your body. But I knew that birth control just did not make me feel good, especially after being on it for like 10 years of my life. So we ultimately came to the decision to do surgery. And so that's when it was confirmed. Now, I probably almost canceled that surgery 5 times because I was terrified. Also terrified that like she would go in and not find anything, right? It's kind of a hit or miss situation for some people.
Right.
It felt very emotional after. And I was always scared for me. I know that I want to be able to have children. Like there are so many ways that you can do this, but I would love the experience of being able to carry my own child. And that was emotional. I think it is for any woman that feels that way. So she assured me after that she was like, I will be there to deliver your first child. It made me feel really good about that because it is scary when you have all this going on and it affects your fertility. It's the unknown.
100%. And did you ever have a cyst removed?
She did. When she went in, she removed some cysts. Yeah, there were some that were larger. Now, I have not had an ultrasound since that surgery, and I am curious to kind of like see what it would look like now. But yeah, she did. She removed some of that. There was a whole bunch on the pathology report, but essentially, yes.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that journey because I feel like it helps give context to what it's like to get a diagnosis. And also, you can imagine now why it's so hard to get diagnosed with either of them because for PCOS, you have a whole list of criteria that you have to meet. Plus, you have on the ultrasound, they're looking for cysts. And then for endo, they have to go in and confirm. Last piece of the puzzle that I think would also be helpful for people is to talk about your SIBO journey specifically.
Oh boy. Yeah.
How
Okay.
did you figure that out?
If you've had SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, then you know it's a bitch. Like it is. It sucks.
Yeah.
Like it really does. I hate it so much. But I was having bloating after everything. And bloating after you eat, a little bit normal, right? Like we eat food, like our stomach's not gonna be flat. It's fine.
Yeah.
There's a difference between like bloating and like deep pain of like hard rock on your stomach
Yeah.
after eating very little and like doubled over in fetal position.
Yeah.
I had read about SIBO, I feel like in the past, I don't know, you probably agree with me on this. Like in the past, like 8 years, it's become more known, but there was still not too much out there about it. So my conventional doctor really didn't know what I was talking about. And like, no harm on her. You don't know what you don't know, and that's okay. So I ultimately, that's when I started doing the holistic. And then I drove to a functional practitioner out of state and did a SIBO breath test. It was my first one. You drink a solution, you like have to do a special diet the day before, and then you blow into these tubes like at certain increments and then send it off. And they test for like methane and hydrogen and see the levels.
Yeah.
At this time, I was still in grad school and I was taking a class with, I call him the SIBO King, but Dr. Hartlick, Jason Hartlick. He was fascinating. But so I was in my gut class, my gut and balance course that I was taking, which I found was my favorite thing ever. But I knew I had just learned how to read a SIBO test. So at that time, obviously I'm not an expert again, just so this doctor messages me because we were able to do telehealth since she's in a different state.
Yeah.
Told me it looked fine, that I did not have SIBO. However, when I looked at it, it was definitely positive for SIBO. And so I messaged her and questioned it, and like I never heard back. And before that, I had done a GI stool test. So the Genova GI effects, which is a science experiment. It's super fun if you've never done one, to see everything that's going on in my gut. And I did like blastocystis, which is like a parasite, which is fairly common, had come up. And so she had to want to put me on a medication for that. But the SIBO question, she never responded. It was very strange. I spent a lot of money there and ultimately found a practitioner in South Carolina, an integrative practitioner who immediately, when she saw the SIBO test, was like, you have SIBO. So I started antimicrobials because I wanted to do a more natural route first and see kind of if I could do it before like going the antibiotic route.
Yeah.
Did multiple rounds. I felt like I smelled like garlic and oregano all the time. It was gnarly. I have a problem eating those foods now. But before that was very much on like a very low FODMAP diet, which is not meant to be long term, but I was terrified of eating food because my stomach hurt so much. And I'm sure you hear this from clients too. Like it just hurts. Like you don't want to eat.
Yeah.
So I went on these rounds, took SIBO test again, had gone down, right? But it wasn't gone.
Got it.
Still kind of there, still methane. And so typically if you have higher methane, you are more constipated. So kind of root cause here now we know was more like the endometriosis, low motility, maybe some thyroid things thrown in at the time.
Yeah.
And then I ended up doing an elemental diet, which is also awful. And I don't necessarily recommend it depending on the person, but it's 2 weeks of me only being able to consume a liquid. Like it was this liquid powder. It smelled great. It tasted like what you would have like it tasted like the smell of hospitals. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it just tasted very clinical. It was so bad. And this is all I could have 3 times a day for 2 weeks.
Wow.
That's it. Supposed
Brutal.
to help us see that. Was not gone after that. Then developed some anxiety around eating, clearly, because for somebody who's dealt with disordered eating, that was not the best approach for me. And then was having more stomach stuff, had a colonoscopy, and the doctor was like, you do have this X, Y, and Z, it's still there. I ended up doing Xifaxan, which is an antibiotic that is pretty well tolerated for most people and really just only targets kind of like the small intestine. And that cleared the rest of it out for me. Like that did it for me. I did that with a round of neomycin with it, some NAC, some other binders, all these things, and then really focused on replenishing my gut.
Yeah.
Honestly, that makes it a short version, but like SIBO for me was like about 1.5 to 2 years. Like it was a long time.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you for sharing that. Because I feel like a lot of times, especially as I don't want to say that like PCOS and SIBO and endo are getting more popular, but like more well known and discussed. I think it's just hard for people to contextualize what does it look like? What is the process like? How do you figure out if you have it? What should you be looking for? How do you advocate to your doctor? And you're so lucky in for lack of a better word, that you were in your gut class, that you were able to read the test and be like, I don't know what you're seeing, but I know what I'm seeing. And a lot of people don't have that resource or that knowledge. And so it's just really helpful, I think, when people are listening to podcasts to be able to say, how can I be an advocate for myself? And maybe it's learning how to read a test, or maybe it's just getting a second opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And I do feel so lucky that I had access to all this. Like I have recognized like my privilege here because there are so many people that honestly just they don't get this kind of care. They don't financially, even like with my endo surgery, a lot of people can't get it because financially it can be really expensive if your insurance doesn't cover a lot of it. And honestly, insurance will cover a certain portion of it, but there is a portion that it doesn't. So it's really hard. And that medication for SIBO, because I went down a rabbit hole of this, very passionate about like gut microbiome and all these things, that 80% of people with IBS really like have SIBO.
Mm.
And Xifaxan for a lot of people is that antibiotic, it can cost up to $2,000 without approval from insurance. And like a lot of people just can't spend that money.
Yeah,
It's just not, if it's not covered, right? Like, and it can be covered if you go to the right doctor and X, Y, and Z, but not always, and not if there's not insurance. So it really is, it's hard
yeah,
because people just don't have the access.
totally, for sure. Thank you for also acknowledging that, because it's so tough. It's so tough out here, and we're
It
just
is.
trying to do our best.
It's so tough. I know. And I'm sure you're the same way as me. When I see a client, like we can talk about all these fun food, superfoods and like all these fun things, but like it's expensive and you don't have to spend thousands of dollars to be healthy. Like if you're not dealing with these things, right? Like there's so many ways to support your body at a low cost or even like free resources. So yeah.
Helpful to be able to know what to be looking for, what tests to run, especially if it's covered, and where to be looking. And I think you also highlighted at one point that SIBO is so hard because the rate of coming back is also high. And so, is there anything that you continue to do today to prevent recurrence?
Yeah. So I will say, once you've had SIBO, your likelihood of getting it again is very high. So, which happened to me the first couple of years. Obviously, I didn't know what was going on. So I got to the root of that. If you have any spell of like food poisoning or sickness, you can get it that way and it can come back. So things like that, but just knowing how to support your gut, using healing herbs and being, for me, it's like variety in my diet, like making sure that I'm getting a little bit of everything. I still support my gut through like integrative therapeutics, motility activator. For me, that has been a game changer, again, specific to me. Don't take that without talking to a provider and really just focusing on that, like keeping things simple. For a while, I took a lot of things, but at this point, I'm doing, thankfully, so much better that I'm at a place where I don't even take a probiotic every day. I don't necessarily think it's necessary for someone to take it every day. And I know some people argue with me on that, but I feel like if you're eating probiotic and prebiotic rich foods and you're getting it that way and really just that nourishment component, it, so far so good. And honestly, that's what a lot of clients we work on, right? Like, yes, glutamine's great. Do I think you have to always take it? No.
Yeah. Okay, two things. First, for listeners who don't know what gut motility is, can you just share? Because you brought it up earlier and then you shared the motility supplement.
Yeah. So if you are constipated, you have to kind of look at it this way, right? So like, I think I explain this. I was not eliminating very often. Like I was very constipated and I went from being a person that went to the bathroom regularly every day. You should be going to the bathroom every day. Like you should have a bowel movement daily. It's good for you. But for me, like I was eating foods, I was not necessarily going. And if I went, I wasn't fully going, right? So
Yeah.
like food that I ate like a couple days ago may show back up in my bowel movement a couple days later, which I know sounds gross, but like that's how it is. And one of the tests, one of the professors that I learned from was like, eat some corn, because typically it doesn't like digest for most people, and see how many days it takes to come up.
Yeah.
And that's like a little trick to see how your motility is. But I was just like I was just not going for days. So
Yeah.
my motility, like the rate at which I was able to poop was affected, right? My digestion was affected. And when you have SIBO too, like I was consuming all this fiber because I was like, I need more fiber. That made it worse.
Yeah.
And it can, like fiber can be really good, but also not everybody can eat like 30 grams of fiber in one sitting.
Can have the Ozempic.
Not everyone can have the Ozempic. It might do more harm for you. You might be more constipated from it. Less, this is a PSA. So focusing on those things and hydration, again, like I was not drinking enough. Hydrate more, electrolytes, all of these things. And also, in retrospect too, I was not eating enough.
Yeah.
And that was also going to affect my motility. And because of that, as we know, it's like it's a whole circle. I'm circling back around, but endometriosis, estrogen dominant typically. I have very high estrogen levels found on my Dutch test. I was not fully eliminating. It all made sense.
Yeah.
So in order to eliminate, you got to go.
It's true.
And if not, then you might, like some people say it's their regular not to go and they don't have stomach issues. And you may not notice anything now, but down the road you might.
I mean, that was me. So that's how I realized that I might not be as healthy as I thought I was, because I forget how I found it, but somebody had shared with me this not be constipated smoothie cleanse for like 10 days. And it was like for 2 meals a day. It's this smoothie situation. They change. And then you had like 1 meal of a protein and veggies for dinner. Would not necessarily recommend this to anybody, but this was before I was even in nutrition school and knew it was happening. And anyways, the point of it was to help you detox and have like multiple bowel movements a day. And I was not having any. Not any, okay, maybe not any, but I was not having multiple bowel movements a day, and I was not going every day. And I was like, well, this is weird. Why is this not working for me? And that started to lead me down the rabbit hole of, even though I don't feel sick and I'm not having some of the more obvious symptoms that you kind of named, like the rock in your stomach, the extreme bloating, the diarrhea. I feel like not to put people who have like consistent diarrhea on blast, but I feel like something is not right when that is happening versus when nothing's happening, you're like, oh, nothing's happening.
Right? And then you're just like, this is normal. And unless you're like bloating, you're like, it's fine. I just go like, but if you have painful bloating, you're like, no. And then you chug a whole bunch of magnesium and then it's like the opposite. And then you're in the bathroom. It's like, there's no medium there.
So definitely important to get to the root cause, like you said, because then you're out here guessing and not testing.
I know. I remember right before things like really like literally where shit hit the fan, no pun intended. But like I was eating this very well-known probiotic yogurt that I'm not going to put on blast because I think they're a great brand. But holy, like, and it was a me problem. It's not a them problem. That destroyed me.
Wow.
I learned a lot.
Oh my gosh.
So maybe don't try consuming like 100 things at once if you're not going to the bathroom like me. Talk to somebody.
Yeah, 100%.
And go to the bathroom daily. That'll change your whole life.
Number 3 or 4 on the Bristol stool.
Exactly. Yeah. It also helps your skin. And who doesn't want clear skin? Right? Your gut and skin. It's fine.
Totally. And it's fine if you need support with that. That's what we do, right? Like that's part of our job as practitioners, is to help your detox pathways, and your digestion is a big one.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I know people always feel uncomfortable when we're like talking about it. I'm like, it's just an icebreaker. We're good. Like we all do it. We should really be talking about it more.
So much more. I know. There's like a children's book, Everybody Poops, or something like that, or Everything Poops, or Everyone Poops. I don't know. And I was like, I need to get that for when I have an actual office space and just have it like out front and center.
Yes. Okay. That's amazing. Why wasn't that book around when I was younger? But I'm glad it's around now, and now I'm going to order it.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for really diving into your journey. I feel like it's so helpful for people to hear. This conversation is so good. You and I can talk for hours, but I thought that it would be really fun since I know a lot of my listeners are women and we both really care about women's health to just give some like rapid fire advice. So, if you were somebody who was thinking that they had a hormonal issue going on or just wanted to get some baseline tests done, what would you recommend?
I mean, ideally, in an ideal world, you would get like a full conventional lab panel, right? Like everything, including your hormones. This is not always the case. You and I know this. So, first, I would try to do that. If that does not happen, find a practitioner that uses the Dutch test. So, it's dried urine analysis. It's going to tell you how you metabolize your hormones. You do have to take it during a specific time. So, find somebody qualified who can do that. That's where I would start. Yeah, we both are. So, come to us.
Just had to say. Yes. And when you do your full blood panel, you said this the full hormone panel, and then I would probably add like a full thyroid and iron.
Yeah, thyroid, iron, CBC, CMP, and it's hard to get a full thyroid panel. We are both very aware of that.
Yeah.
It's something we advocate for our clients often. So more than just TSH, please.
Yes. And if insurance is giving you a hard time or your provider is giving you a hard time because insurance is going to give them a hard time, have them write a letter or have like your nutritionist or whoever write a letter saying these are the symptoms that they're experiencing and this is why it's a medical need, because that's why a lot of these tests aren't covered by insurance because it's harder to prove that there's a medical need. So advocate for yourself for sure.
Yeah, seriously. And we'll help you advocate for you if you need it.
Yeah. Okay, so what are key vitamins and minerals that are important for women's overall health?
This is a good one. All B vitamins, right? B vitamins, I feel like zinc. I love omega, vitamin D. I could go on and on, honestly. I feel like those are like my 4 core ones, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got anything else?
Well, I was just gonna add that all of those are depleted by birth control. So
Yeah.
really making sure that if you, well, maybe not omegas, but the B vitamins, D and zinc for sure are. So if you are on birth control, making sure that you're taking high quality supplement of those to replenish your levels. If you're coming off of birth control, making sure you're taking those so that you're not having what happened to me and getting all types of crazy symptoms because your body is so depleted.
Yeah. Definitely before you come off the pill, I don't recommend anyone going cold turkey. You need to replenish your body for a few months before you go off of it. Like, also recommend reading Beyond the Pill. It also talks about this, which I think is really informative for women.
And then, okay, so they have those vitamins. Perhaps people are not into taking supplements. You shouldn't take anything without talking to a provider. So, specific foods that you would recommend.
Yes. So if you're not wanting to take vitamins, totally get it. Food first approach anyway. I think that you should focus on what you're eating before adding in a whole bunch of supplements. So get your omegas in with some fatty fish, get some salmon, right? Get the B vitamins in, get the vegetables in, like all this fiber, all these things. Honestly, it doesn't have to be complicated. Again, if you're eating protein, fat, fiber, and carbohydrates, you're getting all of these vitamins and minerals in.
Yeah,
Get those leafy greens in. That's what you need. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to force yourself if you don't like things. Find what you like.
for sure. And I would say magnesium in there as well.
Yes.
You've named the foods though, leafy greens, nuts, legumes.
Yeah. Lean proteins, all the things.
And then I was thinking that it could be fun to share some of our tips for reducing certain PMS symptoms. So, what would you recommend if someone is coming with severe cramps before, or I guess like in tandem with finding the root cause, because we know that there's a deeper root cause, but if you just need quick thing to do whilst investigating.
Okay. So I do like to look at labs first. And if I was going to use a supplement, I would like B vitamins, because sometimes like B6 can be really helpful. Again, like omegas, like SPMs, like those can be really good for that inflammation. Curcumin, so like curcumin, turmeric, like really can really help ease things on like a supplement standpoint, food wise, anti-inflammatory. So again, just eating these whole foods, not like fully eliminating sugar, right? But just focusing on the bulk of it being like anti-inflammatory. So the whole foods, not necessarily reaching to ultra processed foods, which again, like we don't villainize food here, but really that focus, like that foundation, also reducing stress, like that can make things a lot worse. And then product wise, like TENS units, or like there's certain creams that are really good. And those Rael heating patches that you like can put on your leggings or like on your underwear, those are amazing and can travel everywhere. And I love those as like little support tools.
That's a good tip because I usually do hot water bottle, but that is not always feasible.
No, it's feasible. These are so good. You just don't put them directly on your skin. It will tell you 10 times not to do that, but they're so good. And you just like rip them off and they last for 8 hours. Best invention of all time.
Love. Okay, yeah. I was gonna say, I'm asking you, but I was thinking a lot of those same things, especially if your cramps are caused by high levels of prostaglandins. So you said whole foods, your omega-3, anti-inflammatory herbs. You said turmeric, ginger is also in there. And then getting enough of your minerals, magnesium, potassium, zinc.
Yeah, because nutrient deficiencies can cause you to have more PMS symptoms. So like this is baseline without us knowing anything about you, just going off of that, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Okay. What about headaches?
Okay, magnesium. Love magnesium. Sometimes some essential oils, a little bit, but like supplement wise, magnesium. Again, with the omega, I actually do really think that can be extremely helpful because again, inflammation. So I would say like a lot of the same things, right?
Totally.
Hydration, electrolytes,
I was gonna say.
reading each other's mind.
I was gonna say hydration, and with the omega, I think I've seen research on EPA being really helpful with that.
Yeah, higher EPA. I agree. Also can like really help with the research on it with like anxiety, which is really cool. So
And then have you seen that like headaches are typically caused by more estrogen dominance? Yeah. So examining that, getting those labs run, looking for the root cause there.
and also then like eating more fibrous foods because estrogen detoxification. So you want more cruciferous vegetables, get some sprouts in there. I love some broccoli sprouts. They don't really taste like much, just throw them in something. That's a really good way to do it with food.
Totally. What about breast tenderness?
Primrose oil can help. But again, you may just be able to take a normal omega for this as well. Like I keep going back to the omega, but I really do think, especially because most people aren't getting enough in their diet, like unless you're consuming fish regularly, you should be, but if not, that's the best way to do it. That primrose oil can be really helpful.
Yeah. I just discovered breast fluffing with a pH.
Dude, what is this? Tell us more.
It's literally what it sounds like. It's literally just like fluffing your breasts. And I guess it just gets the lymph moving more and it can help prevent breast tenderness. I wouldn't do it if your breasts are currently tender. I would do it prior. But it's fun. It's now part of my shower routine.
Okay, this is informative. I love this. We're gonna try it.
I also just love that it's spelled with a PH. Like I don't know why it is, but it is.
Wait, and now because you mentioned shower, you got me thinking Epsom salt baths.
Oh,
Super
yeah.
helpful. Or like magnesium. Like getting, yes.
Yes. And then last rapid fire, thank you for being such a good sport here. I know everyone's going to be like taking notes and feeling really grateful. Is you talk a lot on your social media and with your clients about endocrine disruptors. So, what are some tips that you have for people to avoid endocrine disruptors?
Okay. It's really overwhelming when you dive into the rabbit hole of endocrine disruptors, and we could have an entire podcast on this, honestly. But my biggest advice is like just be informed about it, right? Like, go to my page. I have a little spreadsheet on it that you can just save on your phone and look. But if you don't go there, just like type in something, look up what they are. They're often found in like plastics and certain beauty products and cleaning products. These can affect your hormones because they can mimic estrogen, and then people are estrogen dominant, and it's a whole cycle. So my biggest advice here is start with one product. Like when you finish a product, switch it out for something else.
Yeah, I think those are all really good tips, and you have a lot of great brands that you support. I do as well. So if people are looking for alternatives, you're at the right spot.
Yeah, I've tried a lot, so I know what I actually like and what I don't like. So we have a good handle on it, you and I.
Sure do. Oh, well, thank you so much. This has just been such a fun conversation. I have heard bits and pieces of your story and your wellness journey, but we've never had this conversation of like, tell me your life story. So
A lot.
I really appreciate getting to learn more about you and for you being so vulnerable and sharing your experience so that our listeners hopefully don't have to spend as much time figuring out what the heck is going on in their body.
No, seriously. Like if you don't feel good, find someone that listens. Like keep advocating for yourself because there's that one person that will.
Yeah, it's so true. So, what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self after all of this chatting about your experience?
Okay, I really love this question. So I'm really glad you're asking me this because I've thought about this a lot. So I mentioned this before, like I just turned 30, which is kind of crazy. And I feel the best that I've ever felt. And so if I could go back and tell my younger self something, I spent so much of my life hating my body and saying no to things because I hated the way I looked or the way I felt. And I wore baggy jackets to cover my body. And then I was always striving to be smaller, which then made me smaller in other areas of my life. For instance, like losing my voice. And I kind of lost a lot of who I was as a person. And I regret that. And I don't regret much, but that is one of the big things that I regret. And I missed out on experiences and memories and times with friends and family because I was so focused on how I looked. I wasn't present. And nobody else was focused on how I looked but me. So if I could tell myself anything, it would be that my body is literally the least interesting thing about me. And that the size of my clothes, like that doesn't define my worth. And it gets better. Yeah. Like turn that pain into power. I feel like that's like the biggest thing. Like let yourself feel it, but you can't move around it. Like you have to go through it. And then there is like, it does get better. And it's annoying to say that when you're in a really vulnerable space. Like we see it all the time with our clients, but you have to have patience. You didn't get that. Like these things did not happen overnight. It was a culmination of years. So allow yourself that time and space and don't let yourself miss out on opportunities and isolate yourself.
Yeah, well, especially when your providers are not giving you helpful advice and when you're having to go through some serious stuff to get a diagnosis, to go through surgery, to get on the right antibiotics, to find the right remedies for you, like it's not going to be a linear process and you just need to trust the process. And I appreciate the advice that you gave yourself of just like, this is the least interesting thing about you. None of this defines you.
Yeah. It doesn't. I think we put so much emphasis on it that we're just like can't see around anything else. And it's not worth missing out on part of your life. Like I wasted so many years. I hate saying it like that, but like I didn't feel good in my 20s, but I also isolated myself. You lose friends, like you isolate yourself, like people aren't going to be waiting around for you. Like your life is still going on. You need that support. So don't isolate yourself from that.
Totally. Especially when you're going through a journey like that. I love you.
Love you too.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This is so fun.
Oh, where can people find you? How can they work with you?
So you can go to my website, which is rootedbyrachel.com. I have a blog on there, kind of going to revive it soon, a newsletter. And then I'm primarily active on Instagram. So you can find me at Rooted by Rachel. And that's the best place to find me.
Well, thank you again for sharing your story. Such a blessing to have you and just really grateful for you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Connecting the Dots. If there was something that really resonated with you in this episode, or you simply enjoyed the topic, please share it with a friend or leave a 5-star rating and a written review. Also, make sure you subscribe to Connecting the Dots on the streaming platform of your choice so you can be the first to listen when a new episode is released.